Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again, back with another entitled neighbor story. In today's video, my crazy neighbor parked in my driveway during a serious medical emergency, blocking an ambulance that was supposed to save my kid's life. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The title XXL story starts like this. I'm a mother of 2 children that at the time of this story I was raising alone. My husband is in the army and during this time was on a 6-month tour. And that is basically an estimate, and we could only hope that we came home when he was told. Anyway, I knew this going into my marriage and starting a family, that this was something possible. I have a son and a daughter. My son is 4 years old and my daughter is 2 years old. As you can imagine, my life is pretty hectic, but my schedule needs to be set for some kind of functionality. That is dropping my kids off at daycare/pre-K, going to work, picking them up, coming back home, etc. And that's basically what we do with the rest of the time being spent at home. Now, I live on a dead-end street about 3 houses down from where the actual end is. I also know that people seem to be really bad at turning themselves around, so I avoid parking in the street and almost exclusively use my garage. This makes my house a prime target for a good place to turn around, and I honestly don't mind that. Now, what I do mind are the people that live next door to me, 1 house closer to the dead end. That family is made up of 3 characters who are important to my story. An entitled mother, EM, father, EF, and an entitled daughter, ED. These people only moved in about 6 months ago, but already had made a bad impression on all of us around them. Still, I grew up in the South with a steady diet of good manners. When they moved in, I introduced myself and told them that if they ever needed anything to just come knock on my door. I was having a pretty stressful day because my 4-year-old had been sent home from school sick. He said that his tummy hurt and I took him right to his pediatrician. They did testing and said that he seemed fine despite a slight fever. At that point he didn't seem to even be in pain or discomfort anymore. The doctor concluded that it was probably a small stomach virus and to just take him home to rest. I'm not one of those moms that goes crazy and freaks myself out when my kid is sick. I was just gonna give him light things to eat and have him rest a bunch. And also hope that his sister didn't get whatever virus he had. About an hour after I got home, there was a knock on my door and I opened it to find EM standing there. Me, oh hello. EM, yeah, hi. So, I don't know if you noticed, but my daughter just got a new car to celebrate getting her license. I did notice that they had gotten a new car, a big SUV that she had clearly not yet mastered parking yet. As I would see it, a little too far off the curb. Not so much that it was a big deal though. Her driveway was already filled with 2 cars, which is why she was parking in front of the house. Me, yeah, I did see that. Congratulations to her. EM, a little late, but thanks. Now, I wanted to come over and ask if she could park her car a little further up, in front of your driveway, so that she doesn't need to worry about hitting the curb. Me, I don't think that would work. She cannot block a driveway. EM, well, it wouldn't be all the time. Just so many people turning around and the car could get damaged. Me, I'm sorry, but she cannot block my driveway. I need to be able to get in and out of it. EM, wow, so much for being a decent neighbor. Whatever happened to knock on my door if you need anything? And with this, my son, who I had just gotten to fall asleep, woke up and was now yelling from the other room. Me, I don't have time to discuss this right now, but you cannot let her block my driveway. I'm sure the car will be fine in the street, and if you're worried, then you can switch it with yours and let her park in the driveway. I closed my door on her and went to tend to the much more important matter, which was my kid. He was crying and was feeling warm again. He also was holding a hand to his stomach, which made me think that he was starting to feel pain again. So I gave him some medicine and stayed up with him as I watched him more. Something was just not feeling right in the pit of my stomach, and when I took his temperature, it had gone up again. Something was really wrong in the way that only a mother can feel and cannot really explain. It was 9 p.m. and I wasn't going to be able to get in contact with his doctor. So then I called 911 to get an ambulance to take him to the hospital. And since I know people will ask why I did that instead of driving and talking about the huge cost of an ambulance ride in America, well, I had 2 reasons. Number 1, I didn't feel comfortable strapping my kid who seemed to be in pain in a car seat, and I was worried it might actually cause more damage or pain to him. Number 2, I don't have great night vision driving to begin with, let alone panicking with a 4-year-old crying and a 2-year-old that doesn't know what's going on who would start screaming as well. About 10 minutes later, sirens and lights were flashing outside and I was opening my door and leading the EMTs to my son who was lying in his bed. They checked him over, and while they couldn't give an actual diagnosis, they told me his symptoms seemed consistent with appendicitis, the fever, nausea, and where the pain was in his stomach. All my ability to be calm and cool was out the window as my son was screaming in pain. He needed to get to the hospital now, and I was gonna follow behind with a car since we couldn't all be in the ambulance. Bad night vision be damned at that point. So then they bundled him up and tried to carry him without causing more pain, as I was trying not to cry and comfort him. While getting his sister up and carrying her to the car, and when we got outside, I was able to see more of the setup of the ambulance. It was in my empty driveway, which made sense because the street is narrow and a dead end, and they would need to turn around, and my driveway was perfect for that. Only there was something there that must not have been when they arrived about 15 minutes before we all got outside. 2 cars were now blocking my driveway, and I knew exactly who they belonged to. One was EF's car and the other was ED's brand new SUV. Parking in the exact spot I told them they couldn't, not only that but knowingly blocking the ambulance into my driveway with no way to get out. Nobody was in the car, so I ran to their door and started banging on it like crazy with them not answering. There was only one solution, since it was an emergency, and let me tell you, it was not pretty. Now, while both were blocking it, only one needed to be moved technically to give the ambulance enough space to maneuver. And the law dictates that what the ambulance driver did was totally legal, because here you cannot block emergency vehicles from doing their job. So they backed out of the driveway anyway and just pushed ED's new car out of their way, giving it a sizable dent in the process. Also, an important thing that might not happen everywhere is when you call for an ambulance, you also get police here. I'm not sure why exactly, but in this case it was extremely useful. I was able to tell an officer that I knew who the cars belonged to, and even before the ambulance backed out, they also tried to knock and ring the bell to get somebody out to move these cars. Also, the other way, blocking my driveway as well, I was able to legally get both of the cars towed. One for blocking me in and the other for now just being in the middle of the street. I didn't care about my dumb neighbors and just wanted to follow them to the hospital and figure out what was going on with my kid. It turned out that he did have appendicitis, and it went from minor to serious very quickly. It actually had burst, which was why he got really bad, and I was instantly glad I called 911. They rushed him into surgery and I could only sit and wait for any news. Now, during the wait, I was getting text messages, and while it was not a safe number, I knew exactly who it was from. Either EM or EF, because they were angry texting about the cars being towed and one of them being destroyed, threatening to sue me and make sure that my car was gonna end up in just as bad a condition. I ignored them as the messages just kept coming in because I was overwhelmed with doctors and police officers. Because of what happened at the scene, they needed a statement from me and the situation, the fact that I knew who the cars belonged to, etc. I also decided to share with them the colorful text messages I was getting, and they seemed disgusted by them. I'd been crying on and off the whole time, and this just sent another wave of it through my body. The officer said, "Ma'am, I promise that they're gonna be taken care of. They knowingly blocked the ambulance and refused to respond to commands to move the car. Whoever in that house is found responsible is gonna face criminal charges. All you need to do is take care of your family and yourself. If you get any more threats or if they do anything, call the number on this card, give them your name and the number that is on your copy of the report." About an hour later, the doctors came out and finally told me that he was out of surgery and things went fine. Any longer of a delay and things could have been worse. I cannot believe that my neighbors were such a-holes that they were willing to be spiteful to the point of my kid almost dying. The doctor told me that kids tend to bounce back fast, and I really didn't believe him at first, but by the next morning he seemed like his old self again. A little more tired and weak, but my little boy was now okay. He was even asking about when he could go home and if we could go to McDonald's. I did tell him that for being brave he could have anything he wanted when he was out of the hospital, so of course as soon as the doctor said he could eat anything, we would go. Luckily, my mom was able to drive down and take my daughter, so I could just stay with and focus on my son. Once I knew he was fine, it really started to sink in how horrible the people were for what they did. I was told not to respond to their texts, so instead I was just saving them to see if they would threaten me again. They didn't, but still made nasty comments about the car being ruined and me being the worst neighbor ever, supposedly. They did say that they would sue me, but I didn't care because I literally had police as my witness to the events. I was not scared of them at all and just wanted my life to get back to something normal again, even if normal for me is chaotic. We got home from the hospital and picking up my daughter a few hours ago, and my driveway was now free and no sign of my neighbors in sight. Both kids are currently down for a nap, so I figured it was a good time to sit down and tell this story, because I may or may not have been reading about bad neighbors on here while my son was sleeping and I had nothing else to do. I'm sure that this will not be the end of everything, but for now it's all I have. I'm just glad that my son is doing okay, honestly, and blasting my neighbors on here is actually a little therapeutic. Update to the story. Wow, I didn't expect this to get as many likes and comments as it did. I do have some more news on what's going on, as well as I'm happy to answer a few questions that people had for me in the comments. The big one being that I was able to find out more about the case using the resources some of you sent me in the comments. It turns out that they are pressing charges against EF for obstructing an emergency vehicle. Also for making the threats via text to me. That court date and everything is still TBD, so hopefully when I get more info on that I can let you know. I've seen my neighbors in the meantime and it's just a silent battle of looks. Well, them giving me sneers and dirty looks with me not really doing anything back takes too much energy on my part and I need it all for my kids. Speaking of my son, he is doing great and back to pre-K. He had no complications with the surgery, and since it was an organ that doesn't do anything, he should be fine in the future without any problems. Some of you asked me about my husband and wanting to know his reaction to me telling him. Well, I wish I could say it was more exciting, but he just said that they were jerks and was happy that his son was okay. I'm sure if he sees them after coming home, he'll be giving them dirty looks back. He might be in the army, but he's a sweet and gentle soul. Finally, for this update, I want to thank the numerous people that answered my questions about the police. They come as well as an ambulance because they can get there first and help with first aid training. Also, in case the injury is due to a criminal activity and they need to be there for that. It's always nice to learn something new and I can carry that with me. And thankfully there's another update to the story and it reads like this. Sorry for the long hiatus and people begging me for an update. I just didn't have much time to give until now because the court finally made a ruling on the neighbor. He pled guilty to avoid a trial and is being sent to prison. I can only imagine what would have happened if my son had been seriously impacted by the delay to the hospital because of him. Also, people wanted to know about their cars and I guess they paid to get them back because they do have them again and the SUV is fully repaired. None of them have ever been parked in front of my driveway again, so I guess they got told to park legally or they were just gonna end up getting towed again. The other update I have is in response to people telling me to get some cameras for the property in case something happens again. I did not have any before and realized that if it wasn't for the police having body cams, EF could have possibly gotten away with it and not went to prison. I did not want to go crazy, so I got just one camera that is above my garage door and one that is a doorbell camera. So far, I haven't had to use either one of them seriously, but they are really cool things. At least now I can tell when my door rings that it's a takeout I ordered and not somebody that wants to break into my house. Finally, it's maybe worth noting that my husband is finally back home and we got a very interesting look from the EM on that one. I think they assumed that I was just a single mother and now they realized that I'm married to somebody in the services. I think that's the nail in the coffin that nobody from that house is gonna try and retaliate. I don't think I'm gonna need to update again, so I wanna just thank everybody who enjoyed reading and commenting on this one. It was my first and hopefully last post I will need to make here. And here, Ripe Stars, if you enjoy these longer stories, then please don't forget to like the video, post some star emojis if you haven't already, because I would very much appreciate that. Thank you so much, and the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. My fiance and I live together near the ocean with many tourist attractions. My family from all over the world regularly visit and stay with us. In return, we stay with them when we visit their cities for various reasons, for example work, vacation, etc. Last year I had to travel to the city where her brother lives and she decided to come visit him and his family. She asked if we could stay with them and he declined because he is still protective of his family due to the world events. I understood at first and we stayed at a hotel, but later got annoyed because they had no problem going to dinner and out with us in public. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I suppose this story happened during the pandemic. Anyway, earlier this year I had to go back to his city and again she came along to visit them. He again declined her request to stay at their house, so we stayed at a hotel. I understand some people just don't like to have overnight guests. Anyway, the visit went smoothly and everyone had a good time. Last week he called to ask if he and his family could stay at our place when they come here in a couple of weeks for their vacation. I got really annoyed at this because he didn't let us stay at his house but wants to stay at ours. I told my fiancé that they can stay at a hotel, but she argued that they would need 3 rooms for 7 days due to their family size. She then pointed out that we always let my family stay with us, at which point I countered that it is because we are always invited to stay with my family whenever we visit their cities. She argued family do things for each other without expecting anything in return. We went back and forth until bed last night. I'm sitting here having coffee while she is sleeping, and I am unsure if I'm wrong. On one hand, I know I can be stubborn and petty. On the other hand, he doesn't invite us to stay with him while expecting us to house him and his family. What do you think? Update to answer some questions. So we got a 4-bedroom house along with many air mattresses. Once we hosted 10 of her college friends when they had a get-together, people slept in the living room and dining room. They also have a 4-bedroom house and we would have been happy to sleep in the living room. We have slept on an air mattress many times at my family homes. All of his kids are over 10 and his wife is bringing her sister along and she needs a bedroom of her own. No one in his family have any disability or condition. Our house is near many of the attractions they want to go to. Due to the popularity of the attractions they want to go to, hotels and house rentals close to those attractions are more expensive than normal. Also, our house is close to shopping and restaurants. My fiancé just told me whether they stay with us or not, she is letting her brother borrow her car for the week so that they will only have to rent one car. That means for us that we'll have to carpool that week. This is even more annoying as that would add about an hour to my daily commute. My fiancé is a better person than I am. I can be very petty when I'm annoyed, which is why I usually take cues from her and go with her decisions in certain situations. In this case though, I'm very annoyed, which is why we are in an argument. When it was just me traveling to her brother's city, my company was paying for a hotel room. When my fiancé decided to tag along to visit her brother, she asked him to stay so she could spend more time with her nieces and nephews. And yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Is OP the a-hole here or not? A comment on Reddit said, not the a-hole, I would die on this hill simply because I don't want that many people in my home for a week. And your brother-in-law should not have planned a vacation if he cannot afford a hotel. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. She argued family do things for each other without expecting anything in return. Then why didn't they do something for you when you needed a place to sleep? Comment number 3, not the a-hole. My wife is like this too. Always goes on about why do you help your family and not mine? It helps that my family helps each other while her family only takes. And yeah, ripe stars, honestly, I hate it when people always take from you but never give something in return. That is one of the things I really despise. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. The events of this story take place during my teen years, 13 to 17 years old, when my mother and I moved into a new rental property. The details might be a bit patchy here, as I don't have a lot of good memories associated with this house and I've done my best to forget about a lot of the events of these years. However, I do have one good memory of petty revenge I got one day on a neighbor. Just to give you a little bit of backstory, my family had very limited funds at the time and had just used what little spare money we had on moving expenses. We could not afford to move again, so did not advocate as much for ourselves as we should have, maybe. Literally, on the day we moved in, we turned on the radiator heaters and discovered that the radiators could not be turned on as the radiators caused a leak in the living room ceiling. The landlord was aware of this but would not be fixing this and told us to buy a space heater to keep warm in the winter. Neither would he be fixing the broken downstairs bathroom or replacing the roof, and he told us that if we wanted the walls painted, we could buy paint and do it ourselves. We had not asked about paint, he just volunteered that we could put our time and resources into improving his house if we wanted to. Which of course, we did not want to do. The worst thing he ever did was open our door one Saturday morning without notice or even knocking, while we were still in our beds upstairs, and shout into our house that he was just checking in. This was a clear violation of our lease, and he left without telling us that he would let our sick cat outside when he opened the door. Luckily, I found the little guy on a porch across the street later that day, but I was so mad at our landlord. This story is not about horrible landlords though. It's about our neighbors Karen, 40 female, and Ken, 40 male. The backstory was to explain why we wanted nothing to do with our terrible landlord, and it just so happened that the day we moved in, Karen and Ken, who lived next door, told us that they were his friends, implying that if we did anything they did not like, he would be hearing about it. It was hard to avoid Karen and Ken, since we shared a front porch with them, row house, and they were true to their word. And by the way, ripe stars, what worse can you imagine than having a terrible landlord and the terrible neighbors next to you being friends with him? Anyway, if our lawn got too shabby, Karen and Ken let him know. If our trash cans did not have lids, Karen and Ken called the county to put violation stickers on our cans. If the rat inspector was in the neighborhood, they sent the inspector under our back porch. It was like walking on eggshells in our own home. So despite all of this, or because of it, we tried to stay on good terms with these terrible neighbors for the first couple of years. We would not say anything to Ken when he came into our yard for dandelion greens for his pet iguana without even asking for permission. Then, around when I was 15 years old, Ken asked me if he could hire me for a job. He and his family would be going on a family vacation that winter and he needed a dog walker for his daughter's dog. We agreed on a rate, I don't remember how much, and I walked his dog for him 3 times a day for 2 weeks even when it snowed. The dog was elderly and did not give me any trouble, but I could have done without the bad weather. My mother was very proud of me for taking the job, as she hoped this would be a fresh start with this family and we would get on better terms. Once Ken and his family returned from vacation, I gave him an update on his daughter's dog and told him how well behaved she had been. I expected him to pay me, but he did not say anything about money. Since I was a shy teenager, I went home without payment but asked him about it the next time I saw him. He said, "It's my daughter's dog, ask her for your money." His daughter was a college student who was not even at home that much, but I couldn't force him to pay me, so I just left again without payment. About a week later, I saw his daughter, probably home for the weekend from college, but she said she didn't have any money when I asked and said that she would tell her dad to pay me. Guess what happened the next time I asked him? He was angry this time and repeated what he had said the first time, even when I mentioned asking his daughter. Yeah, I never got paid and my mother and I were too scared to ask again. Looking back on this, I feel like they knew how intimidated we were of their relationship with our landlord. One call to him about us harassing them and we would be homeless. They knew we were terrified of them and that they would never have to pay me for walking their dog. So yeah, they took advantage of a 15-year-old kid. Around this time, or maybe a year later, my mom had a conversation with Karen. Karen had actually been friendly recently. She took an artistic photo of our cat in our kitchen window. A black and white photo with interesting light going across the cat's face, which she then gave to my mom since she thought it looked pretty. We thought the whole interaction was odd since Karen admitted to hating cats in the past, but my mom accepted the photo like an olive branch. Then Karen mentioned a tree growing in our backyard. It was what we call in this area a trash tree, since it is the fast-growing variety. She said she was worried it was going to drop seeds into her yard and spread, but her brother could help us with it if we liked for like $100. My mom considered it and thought it was a good price, so she agreed. Looking back on it, I know that our landlord probably should have been the one to pay for this, but my mom was worried that he would come to the house to cut it down himself, so she agreed to let Karen's brother do it. Over the course of 2 days, Karen's brother cut down the tree and hauled away the rubbish. When he sent us the bill, it was $300. When my mom asked about the price, he insisted that the job was bigger than he had anticipated, which resulted in the 3-time cost. He got angry about being questioned as well, so my mom cut him a check. That was the second time we had felt taken advantage of by them. My mom was a single mother struggling to make ends meet and they knew this. $300 was a lot of money for us. They constantly reminded us of their relationship with our landlord, being sure to stand outside and chat with him for 30 minutes following our biannual inspections. On one particular visit, the landlord stared at our front yard as if expecting it to be shabby and said, "It looks good. I don't know what they were talking about," since he had obviously been informed otherwise. No matter what we did, Karen and Ken hated us and wanted us gone, and would not stop mentioning any little thing they could to our landlord. At a certain point, around when I was 17, we stopped making nice with them. No more cordial smiles and waves were exchanged on either side. On one particular day, my mom and I were gardening in the front yard. Ken, who was a little less hostile than his wife, did greet us as he opened his front door. He left it open as he was painting and walked away. And here comes the revenge. Our neighborhood had a bit of a feral cat problem. We had been feeding the cats, which Ken and Karen in particular viewed as vermin. Perhaps that's why they hated us, and my mom was friends with another woman in the neighborhood who was helping to catch and fix the cats. One cat in particular that hung out in our yard was grey and less than a year old. I'll call her Jillian or Yillian, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, for the purpose of this story. Jillian usually stuck to the backyard, which is why I was surprised to see her in the front yard while gardening. She was a feral cat who had never been in a house in her whole life, so I was shocked to see her sniffing around Ken's open door. I did not expect her to go into their house, but I didn't discourage her either, and inside she went. I started laughing, picturing the look on Karen's face when she saw a cat in her house. I love cats, so if I'd been a little older, I probably would have kept Jillian away from those people to protect her, but as a teenager, all I could think of was the satisfaction of getting sweet revenge on Karen and her husband after all the years of grief they had put us through. And then I heard it, that shrill scream and running footsteps. I did my best to stifle my laughter, knowing what had happened. Karen was facing her worst nightmare, a small fluffy adolescent kitten. My conscience was eating at me a bit because I didn't know what those people would do to Jillian, and also maybe I could get a closer look. I knocked on the ajar door and asked if everything was okay, since I heard a scream. Ken told me there was a cat in his house and asked if it was mine, even though he knows we had inside cats only. I told him it was a feral cat who had never been handled, but I volunteered assistance catching her. Ken led me upstairs where I saw it. That sweet pro-revenge. Ken said the cat was in the bathroom, and as I walked down the hallway, Karen peeked around the door, perhaps wondering who her husband was talking to, and then she looked back to the bathroom, eyes wide and wild, and let out another shriek. I was looking at a grown woman in her 40s screaming at a little cat like it was a rat. I don't know how I didn't laugh again in her face as she slammed the bedroom door to hide, but I will never forget the look on her face. It was so worth it. With Ken behind me, I went into his bathroom. The cat was climbing the shower curtain, and I didn't blame Jillian for being scared. I was scared of Karen too. She let me hold her under the armpits away from my body and did not bite or scratch as I lifted her off of the shower curtain and carried her out of the house to be released back into the yard. Ken thanked me, but he gave me a suspicious look like he thought the cat might have been mine since she didn't attack me. But I did not care about his unvoiced suspicion. I'd gotten to see his ridiculous wife acting like an elephant who was spooked by a mouse. However, things did not improve with those neighbors, not that we had expected them to. They even complained a year later when we moved out about how much space our moving van took up on the day we finally got out of that house. I adopted Jillian and took her with me when I moved. I still own her today, and she is no longer feral. Sometimes I pet her and think about that revenge she helped me get on Karen. I know it was a small payback on those people, but the real win was finally getting away from them. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I can imagine how good that felt for OP, and I'm very glad that they could leave those neighbors behind, finally. And also props to her for adopting that cat. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.